Theories and Star Wars go hand in hand. All the way back to the beginning, there were magazine articles and news segments, and that legacy of theory has continued to this day. But this Anakin theory takes it to a whole new level. And how will Dune impact Star Wars? Welcome to Star Wars Uplink, your place for everything Star Wars gaming, the TV shows, and the movies. Let's jump in.
Just you reconsider playing that message for him.
Star Wars is in this really interesting place with Anakin as a character, because after the slight fiasco with the prequel trilogy and then the redemption arc of the Clone Wars animated show, we now have a deeper love for Anakin as a character.
Yeah.
Which I'm very happy for. I think Hayden Christensen deserves all of this for sure. But they're starting to run into this Anakin problem where, like, it's even more jarring to see the dichotomy between nice boy Anakin to bad boy Darth Vader.
Yeah, there is this like strange anti-evolution of him, it seems. Where we see him, as we see him as a kid, we see him as a teen-ish going into his 20s, and then we see him just go straight bad. But then, in the Clone Wars, then we get more of this like general, nuanced character of a teacher and and just what he learns and things. And then just to go straight back to bad, it's like oof. Yeah, I don't know. There's more to be said.
Yes, there's a lot of like the differences in the storytelling, and there's various theories on this as we're going to talk about today. But I want to start this conversation off with just like some of the differences that we see. I think Clone Wars handled this really well of like showcasing the deeper, darker tones of Anakin as a character, and then like making a little bit more understandable that he would eventually fall to the dark side, because I think you missed a lot of that in the movies. Like, yes, we knew he had to become Darth Vader because that's who he is. But in the movies, it wasn't quite as like gradual of a like deception or betrayal to the Jedi. I want to go back and rewatch the prequel trilogy again in that context of like specifically looking at Anakin as a character and whether or not he does, or George Lucas does a good job of like showcasing that gradual fall instead of just like all of a sudden he's there. But there is this theory floating around. I think it's been around for a little while that I want to bring up here. It's called the Two Anakins Theory. Palpatine makes a clone of Anakin. And this clone is the evil clone. It's like the whole joke around the evil twin. It could explain quite a bit on like we have the good Anakin, which is the one that we know and love and would never turn the dark side. It's the one that we see most fondly on and doing the things that we'd expect Anakin to do. And then there's the dark evil clone. And this is why we see such a stark contrast in the character of Anakin Skywalker. And this is why he becomes Darth Vader. There's also a sub-theory of like, yes, there's the Two Anakins theory, but maybe instead of Anakin, it's actually just Darth Vader that is the clone. Which is why he isn't fully living up to his dark side capabilities. But this is the theory that we have here.
Okay.
Is that to explain the differences of Anakin as a character, we have Palpatine playing with cloning again. Now, I want to give this the benefit of the doubt first.
Yeah.
And then I want to talk about why this isn't quite the thing that you might believe it to be. But how do you feel about this Two Anakins theory?
If I'm trying to look at it from a positive perspective, from a I'll run with it perspective, it's interesting. Like I can see where people came up with this idea, because it does feel like it was a light switch change of like him being like I'm just kind of like mad with the Jedi to
they didn't give me my toy.
To I'm gonna kill them all. Like that's a little extreme there.
Specifically the youngling killing part, that's where people are like, Anakin could, no matter how far into the dark side Anakin gets, he wouldn't kill younglings, right? Like that's the theory that we have here of like why does he go to that extreme in this direction when we see him in this other light.
I mean, once you've killed sand children,
Yeah.
the next thing is humans.
Clearly.
Everyone else. Oof.
Yeah.
Again, I can see the sentiment of this. What about you?
Let's just say we're going to play with this being the thing here. I think it would be interesting to showcase Palpatine's like deeper investment into cloning and this kind of thing. But like, it ultimately goes against what Palpatine's original intentions were with Anakin in the first place, which was to utilize his vast strength in the Force. His midichlorians being off the scale, his M count being unmatched in the Star Wars galaxy. That is why Anakin's there in the first place. It's like that's the key here. Is Anakin's quite powerful in the Force. No matter what you do to clone him, it's not necessarily going to reach the power of the original. But let's just say we're giving it the benefit
Unless
of the doubt.
they got a
here.
hold of Omega, in which case, all is well.
Yes. But I think it's an interesting, like, deeper dive and connection piece into this idea of the clones. It's a good story beat between like the dichotomy of like working with the clones to becoming one, and if Anakin doesn't know he's a clone, is he actually a clone? Like, it gets into some Blade Runner type territory there. So there's a lot to be said with this idea of like Anakin actually being a clone, but there's a lot of problems with this theory.
Yeah.
The first is what we're learning about in Bad Batch, being very topical right now. Palpatine's still figuring out the cloning.
Yeah.
So at this point, Order 66 and Anakin's turn to the dark side has already happened.
True.
So how could this theory work if they're still trying to figure out how to replicate the Force in clones?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't see cloning as like a 3D printing quick process. This is a very long, arduous process of like developing a human. Yeah, so timeline is not shaping up for sure. One thing that I'm noticing is how do you get all the history and emotions back into a clone when they haven't had the experience? Like, I can
bringing Blade Runner back into the conversation. This is obviously not Star Wars, but Blade Runner, like their idea are these replicants, and then you can embed memories from other people into these replicants, and that is how you kind of foster these like false memories and create these memories.
Right.
So I would assume if you really wanted to do something like that, you might be able to.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen any examples of this in Star Wars as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
So that is a good gap though in the story of like this theory of like, if he thinks he is Anakin, how do those memories get there? Like what's the pathway that those memories do get there in the first place? And like in this timeline period, like they're still figuring out how to clone the midichlorians, or the ability to utilize the Force. And then that's not even taking into account like this implanting of memories. Can you as Palpatine create this clone and control him?
Yeah.
Like, that's still not something that is properly in place, considering that you can't really control the clones that you used in the war. Technically you can, but not in the way that you would do like a robot, where like a droid, you can say, hey, go do this, do exactly this in this order, and do not do anything else.
Right.
You can't quite do that with a clone.
And that was the whole beauty of Anakin, was that he was so like on his feet, like so quick thinking. And there's also a lot of like emotions that you see play throughout, especially during his change.
Yes.
That you wouldn't be able to explain with a clone. Like if it was a clone, if say the timelines of Bad Batch were all matching up and whatnot, it's like that moment that we have of him crying when he's in the depths of his like badness.
What have I done?
Yeah, like I don't know. Well, not even that. Even later on when he's at the Mustafar, there is this like really quick moment of him like just being a moody broody e-boy, and but he's actually crying in that moment too. So it's like you wouldn't get those emotions, I don't think, from a clone. who is pretty much trained to be bad and do these things and be totally fine with it, like to not have that moral compass at all.
Yeah.
So I feel like there is that. Also, there wouldn't be as much of a connection to Obi-Wan.
Why would you care?
Yeah.
Like especially in the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, which we've talked about at length here, we both do not like.
No.
But if you take even just the encounter of Anakin as Vader and Obi-Wan, it doesn't make sense if he's a clone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another level of where that theory doesn't quite work out.
Yeah, the whole focus and drive to hunt down Obi-Wan,
it wouldn't be there.
It wouldn't be that strong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different levels that this kind of like falls apart, especially like you could probably make that argument pretty well in Legends. I still think you would have to like do a little bit of a stretch to make it work in Legends. Mm-hmm. You definitely can't do it in canon because you have time and time again this reinforcement of Anakin and Vader are the same person.
Yeah.
Yes, Vader, quote unquote, killed Anakin as a person inside of him, which didn't necessarily work because we see that redemption arc at the end that Vader does repent almost and has this redemption. We do have like this moment where Anakin repents and that's part of it. So like there are many levels and layers and pieces and points to this theory that just do not match up. Mm-hmm. And then timeline wise, it doesn't match up.
No.
And if you look at it, it doesn't even like, oh, it kind of like barely misses it. Like, no. If you really look at it, it doesn't seem like Palpatine was that successful widely in his efforts to clone with the Force. Mm-hmm. Because in The Mandalorian, the reason why they're looking for Grogu is to utilize his specific DNA and Force sensitivity. Mm-hmm. Like that's the whole goal of The Mandalorian.
So yeah, things are getting a little mixed up. It would be interesting, like a really interesting Palpatine development, I guess I'll say, for him to have created a new Anakin. Mm-hmm. Very much like Frankenstein and his monster or something. Like there would be so much more of this connection. Mm-hmm. But I feel like there's already enough of a connection with Palpatine and Anakin, just with the undermining and like underlying
the reason why
that he's gotten him this far sort of thing.
And there's like a clear, I don't know if this is true in canon, but in Legends, the reason why Vader's suit is the way that it is because Palpatine wanted to put him at a disservice, just in case Vader / Anakin ever wanted to overthrow Palpatine, he wouldn't be as strong as Palpatine was. Mm-hmm. There are better suits that could have been used.
Just throw him in a back tank.
Could have been upgraded. The fact that he would never be properly healed from that suit and would be constantly in this state of flux is the reason why he's so rageful, but wasn't able to heal and become even stronger than he was at that moment.
Yeah.
So there's that side of things too. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, the end of that theory. Yeah. There are so many ways that you can disprove it. So myth / theory, busted, not true. And then when we look at like Star Wars as a whole, when we look at the changes that they're going to be making to Star Wars, the movies with the Mandalorian Grogu, with the Ultimate Rey movie, there is a changing movie landscape right now. Mm-hmm. There is no longer this easy path to make $1 billion with Star Wars. There's no path to make an easy $1 billion in movies, period.
Yeah.
Except for one. Mm. And it's these well thought out, well budgeted, well executed, great story movies like Oppenheimer, Barbie, and Dune. Mm-hmm. Dune is the big one. Dune is the closest relative to Star Wars because Dune inspired at least somewhat Star Wars.
Yeah.
And now Dune is the biggest threat to what Star Wars is currently. Dune is taking the better approach, in my personal opinion, to sci-fi. Star Wars obviously is science fantasy. It's more in the fantasy side than it ever is in terms of sci-fi, but they're very close. They both have spice. They both have sand planets. They both have big worms.
True.
One's on an asteroid, one's on a planet. So Star Wars is Dune, basically. But when you look at Star Wars now, like Star Wars hasn't been the big blockbuster movie. There hasn't been one in 7 years. There hasn't been one to this scale in quite some time. And the budgets are overblown. The stories aren't that great. The effects aren't anywhere near what Dune is. Obviously, those movies came out a while ago. Technology has advanced and all that stuff. But when you have someone like Denis Villeneuve, I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Hi, my name is Denis Villeneuve. My name is Denis Villeneuve. My name is Denis Villeneuve. My name is Denis Villeneuve.
I'm not French Canadian. You've got this incredible filmmaker who has a incredible repertoire of movies. Blade Runner 2049, he did. There is so much skill and passion for storytelling in this one person who's leading this science fiction revival. And then you look at Star Wars and you're like, Star Wars could never. But I think Dune coming out with its success, you can't not, as a Disney Bob Iger executive, be like, guys,
They're doing something right
they're
over
doing
there.
something good. They're cooking over there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
It's funny. I never thought to compare the two. Weirdly enough, like for some reason they feel so alien to each other, but they aren't. Yeah. They really aren't.
They have some similarities.
They're
Paul and Luke are very similar in some ways.
Yes, there is a Venn diagram.
They both have
that can
prophecies
very much
about
be
them.
made. Yes, see, like they're all here to save the world, to an extent. So there is this overlap for sure. Star Wars is different though. Like I feel like it reaches more audiences because it's, I don't want to say lighter, but I think it is lighter.
If you look at Dune, if you look at the massive success Dune was, you don't have to dumb down your story to be huge.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer had a budget that was of $100 million. Let me put that in perspective. The Flash movie had a budget of $300 million. The Indiana Jones movie, $300 million. Oppenheimer had a budget of $100 million, and it made over $1 billion.
Wow.
The people are speaking with their wallets. They want the big blockbuster movies, but they don't want the cash grab movies.
Yeah. I feel like it is just a telling of our time where it's like, if you know what story you need to tell, you know, like there's this
it's not
like I have
Denis could have done anything.
Yeah. Yeah, but this was the story he decided I need to tell this story.
Yeah.
I feel like it'll happen. Like people are here to make creative choices and make these things happen, and they will work within the constraints. And I feel like constraints are actually really good.
Yes.
It makes more
You can't rewrite it 70 times.
Right, and it makes your creative choices that much count that much more. You have to be extremely strategic and smart about what you're doing and to plan better and to have a better vision of the stories you really want to tell. And you really have to ask yourself, is this a story worth telling?
Yes.
I feel like we need more of that in Star Wars. Please ask yourself, is this a story really worth telling? Yeah,
we're getting honestly, if he goes forward and does his trilogy with Dune Messiah, we're going to get the modern day Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
We're going to get the modern day Star Wars in a way. The original trilogy was incredible. It cemented the idea of a trilogy, but I think Lord of the Rings executed on it even more so.
Yeah.
Taking that source material and doing something even greater. But I think if you look at it, Lord of the Rings and Dune are even more accurate to compare because they're both based off of books. So they had something to base themselves off of other than Star Wars, which was a net new project.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, we're getting this new modern trilogy that we haven't seen in forever. Successful, well done, well shot, well acted. Everything is great. The music's incredible. You can say the same things about Lord of the Rings. you can't say the same things about Star Wars, specifically modern Star Wars, because it seems like they're just trying to chase the trends of what's going on here, rather than like what Dune was of like, oh hey, you know that like 1960s science fiction book that was kind of like complex and had a glossary of like 60 pages in the back of terms just so you could understand what's going on? Yeah, we're going to make that movie. And we're not even going to announce the sequel, even though we're going to shoot it like it's just part 1. We won't know if we're going to make part 2 until this one does well.
Yep.
So they put all of their eggs into one basket, and it did very well. Mm-hmm. And as Disney, I think you need to do that more. You need to be more strategic with your movies. You need to tell more stories that are better than they have been.
Yeah. You need to allow the audience to decide if this is a story worth pursuing.
Yeah.
Maybe. It seems like that's what they want. They want people to just throw the money at them. Well, make something that we want to throw money at.
Yeah,
how about
exactly.
that?
Don't complain about no one seeing your movie unless like you actually put some effort into it.
Yeah.
And this isn't speaking to whether or not you personally like this Star Wars. Like, I personally hate Obi-Wan Kenobi, the show. I love the character of Obi-Wan. I despise that show, but I know people who love it, and it's perfectly fine for them to love it. But I think objectively, you can look at all of Star Wars recently, Andor as the exception, and probably seasons 1 and 2 of Mandalorian as well. Season 1 for sure. If you look at Star Wars, you can honestly say, objectively, Star Wars isn't as good as it could be. Whether or not you enjoy it or hate it, I think we can all agree that Star Wars can be better and should be better.
I agree. And I'm not really sure. I don't want to blame anyone. Like, I don't want to be like, well, it's because they're choosing these directors, or it's because this.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Any one person's problem. It's not Bob Iger's
No.
problem. It's not Dave Filoni's problem. It's not George Lucas for selling Star Wars' problem. It's just like the institution of Disney is built for, how can we repeat the same style of movies over and over again
and still make as much, if not more, money off of it?
Yes. That's why they're heavily investing into sequels and continuations of stories rather than making any new projects.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, but that's what Disney does. So we can't really be mad that a Disney Star Wars is a Disney Star Wars, but we can be mad that they aren't taking the opportunity to do something interesting and new here. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, or contact@uplinkpodcast.com. I think there's some interesting things around this topic, as well as the Two Anakins Theory. I think that was fun to break down. Let us know if you want to see more theory busting in the podcast. But as always, thank you for listening, and may the Force be with you.